All right, we are here. Another episode of One Athlete, One Day. We are looking at Hye Soo, who is fresh off of the her first in-person semifinal appearance as a Masters athlete in the 40 to 44 age group. We've been working together for an extremely long time. I think she is the second most tenured athlete on my roster. It's been close to, if not more than a decade at this point. I struggle with time, but it's somewhere in that time frame. So she has evolved quite a bit as an athlete in her priorities and just the way that she's improved at so many different things. I'd like to think that I've evolved as a coach, so things are looking quite a bit different than they did back in the early days. And we're just going to walk through this day and kind of talk about why we're doing the things that we're doing. So one of the things that we've been focusing on, or that we had put a lot of emphasis on in our off season last year, was improving the strict handstand push-up. On my end, I thought that was going to carry over really well to the jerk, and it didn't actualize the way that we had hoped. So one of the big things that Sue emphasized over this offseason was that we need to be doing more jerks and we need to be doing more external loading in the overhead position. So this is how we're going about that. Starting with the squat, clean, and jerks. She's always had a really strong clean. Priority for her is going through the squat. So power clean, she creates a ton of elevation and bar speed. And that squat, we tend to get buried a little bit. So we are prioritizing the squat, clean, and jerk. There is an emphasis on squatting for those of you who are looking at the deadlifts and wondering why that's not there. Those are on other days of the week. But yeah, we're trying to make sure that we're putting together what we would consider like the worst case scenario for a clean and jerk is that it's mandated to go through a squat and mandate obviously the jerk, and getting exposure to that. We're still in our early phases of this as far as really trying to drive the 1RMs up. So the way that I typically think about strength work is that I want to spend 6 weeks, 8 weeks or more developing a foundation for the athletes to build off of. That's spending a ton of time sub 90%, sub maximal, and really trying to reinforce some of the technical things that we're going to work on so that those are more resilient to fatigue. And then also making sure that we've built enough resiliency to the movement pattern that as we start to go heavier, the body feels confident expressing strength rather than going from competing into the early offseason phase, which doesn't have as much weightlifting in it, into an immediate aggressive weightlifting phase. In the past, I have found that while some athletes handle it really well, a lot of athletes will end up injured. And that's the last thing we want when you still have 8 months before we're doing anything in the HQ season. So that's kind of where this clean and jerk is coming from. Once we move on from that, I believe that absolute strength progressions for Masters athletes need to be in the program year-round. So it really doesn't matter how strong the athlete is. When we are a Masters athlete, strength tends to be much more heavily weighted just because it gives you access to treat Metcons a little bit differently than athletes who are strength limited. So while the deadlift is not an inherent massive priority for her, it is important that it stays in. And the single arm dumbbell push press is something that we're doing as an accompaniment. Depending on the athlete and their gym setup, sometimes I'll have an athlete set up 2 barbells and do a push press with the deadlift, or something of the sort. In this case, I tend to revert towards the push press as one of the best developers of the jerk that we have at our disposal as coaches. In this case, going single arm is going to allow her to not take up too much space in a gym that when she's training at the downtown gym, at my old gym at CrossFit NOLA, we might get a little bit tight on space. And if she is at mid-city, then maybe we have some leeway to move to a barbell, but that's something that we'll discuss over time as to what makes the most sense for her, just because the downtown gym is closer and more convenient to her lifestyle. Once we get into our conditioning, so today's conditioning is got a very specific theme for me, and that is that I want to be doing higher skill pulling in manageable sets. So 2 rope climbs, 3 bar muscle ups. I want moderate to lighter weight barbell cycling, so overhead squats, clean and jerks, and then I want bounding, so double unders and box jump overs. In this particular case, it's really nice to be able to mix the patterns and be able to get a very wide array of the sport with just this one single conditioning session. So we're getting 6 different movements, but we are mimicking the patterns enough to where there's going to be some compounding fatigue from the first set into the second set. And that is why we're kind of at this time of the year placing a little bit more of the priority movements in the first part and then our secondary movements into the second part. The concept here is that I want her to get really good at high heart rate breathing with these specific movement patterns. So one of the things that we found in training over the last few years is that the higher skill upper pulling, or like the higher muscular demand upper pulling movements, do have a tendency to get a little bit slow as far as transitions to those movements. And so in this case where we're chunking the work and giving a longer rest interval, we are giving her permission, her body permission, to make those transitions a little bit faster. Same thing onto the barbell. Bounding has historically been a movement that really jacks up the heart rate, and it does for many people. So I'm just kind of leveraging our bounding here to do that. And double unders has been a little bit of a priority in general over the last couple of years, really since pregnancy, where the double under, like the bounding mechanics, have just created a very different response in heart rate and breathing since that. So it's just something that we're still working towards, and we've got things happening on other days to continue to develop some of the tension and stiffness inside of the calves while not compromising the squat mechanics too much. Luckily, she does have very good squat mechanics, so I am able to be a little bit more risk tolerant there than I might have to be with someone who's got naturally stiffer ankles and can't absorb a little bit of a loss in ankle dorsiflexion. I wrote a blog a while back talking about how much the handstand walks carried over for her. So last year we spent a lot of time doing these skill progressions completely fresh. Now that she has kind of gotten to a point where everything feels good, we take that same thing and put it fatigued. So one of the ways that I've tried to leverage improving a movement while it's not necessarily in conditioning is putting it on the back end of the session. So for those of you who are familiar with training in this method, like when you do this hard of a Metcon, you are 100% going to be fatigued still when you get into this handstand walk work, and you're going to get a little bit more out of it, assuming you're still able to maintain that quality. One thing I did not put in here or did not mention here is that if you notice, she's getting full static rest. The reason for that is that if you've been to New Orleans in July or August or June, or really pretty much any month of the year that's not in the winter, you would understand that you can't train the same way that you train in most of the rest of the country. So I'm getting ahead of the fact that, yes, it would be nice to be able to put active recovery here, but it's not realistic to maintain quality. And at the end of the day, I'm more concerned about her ability to perform in March, April, May. And so, in order to do that, I want quality to take place now, and then we'll start to do some of those other types of active recovery protocols later down the road. We are finishing up with a dumbbell seal row. So we do have some pulling here. In general, though, because of the format, we're not getting a ton of contractions in upper pulling today. And one of the things that I've noticed in her training in general is that there is a pretty high response to frequency of upper body pulling, based on my observation as well as some of the literature that I've read just in general on strength and conditioning. The upper body does respond well to variance, not too much. We don't just throw chaos in every single week, so we'll run through a progression of dumbbell seal rows on the incline bench. But we need to have that kind of movement changing with some regularity every 3 to 4 weeks. And so all I'm doing here is just making sure that there are contractions happening in that horizontal pulling plane. And my hope is that, assuming that everything continues down the path that I have observed over the past few years, is we'll continue to create traction just by having this in as an extra day of pulling that's not going to create too much mechanical stress. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know if you have any questions, thoughts, want to see anything else specific in the future. And yeah, thanks for watching.